I'm Chris Hogg with Digital Journal, and we are sitting down with Nic Beique, the CEO of Helcim. Nic, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
So off the top, there's going to be folks that know what Helcim does, but there will be those who don't. So tell us a little bit about the story of the company you've built and where you're at.
So Helcim, in short, is a payments company. So we compete with Square, Stripe, Moneris. We're 100% located in Calgary. We're servicing 30% of our business is Canadian, 70% is US. We're servicing now tens of thousands of merchants. We're a 160-person company. So we've grown quite a bit. We launched the version that you see today in 2020. So we're about 5 years old now. That's us in a nutshell.
What was the motivation? Because getting into financial services, competing with some pretty big companies is not something a lot of people wake up wanting to do. What was the inspiration?
I mean, if you look at the payments market, so people know, say, Square. The reality is that, I'll give you an interesting stat. Square, despite all their size, is 2% of the market. So it shows you that the sheer size of it, right? It's not really a winner take all. We saw that there's a lot of people going into payments either on the kind of pure e-commerce side, kind of Stripe, or really kind of like very small, quick order restaurants, coffee shops like Square. But we fell in love with the middle of the market, which is kind of like, call them a boring but awesome businesses, like automotive and vets and dentists, and and they were really being ignored. They're primarily serviced by kind of legacy bank-owned processors, and we said nobody's really kind of disrupting and bringing innovation and software to that middle part in payments. So we went for the boring but awesome middle, and that's really where we've carved out our space.
So I want to touch on innovation in financial services. I want to touch on open banking a little bit, but you yourself, when you're building Helcim, we always like to look for lessons learned. Building in financial services, you've scaled to 160 people, you said. Yeah. Any key takeaways for other leaders who are building businesses looking to scale before we dive into the industry stuff?
I mean, in the financial services, it's always interesting because you're taking the hardest parts about finance, underwriting and KYC and anti-money laundering and all the pieces that make it a high barrier to entry. And then you're taking the hard parts about technology, uptime, and you've got a big kind of target on your back, from a security standpoint, everything, and you're combining the two. And I think that's why fintechs are wonderful businesses, but they're also really hard businesses. Unlike, say our kind of pure-blooded like software brothers, I think fintechs are just wired a little bit differently. A lot of times they're a finance company first, right? Going back to your question in terms of lessons learned, you have to go into it pretty open-minded that you can't just try to like break your way through it. It's people's money. It's trust. People will put up with a lot with software, but when it comes to their money and their cash flow, whether it's on a personal or on a business level, they set a really high bar. As much as people say, "Oh, I don't know if I like my bank," they still kind of trust their bank not to run away with the money. So I think you have to be a little bit less cowboy in the fintech space and really command the space that you create for yourself, but also value the trust of the customers that are taking chances on you, and really lean into that trust and find ways to never break it.
A lot of the folks who follow what Digital Journal covers are interested in the innovation story. Sometimes it's incremental, sometimes it's macro change. In Helcim's case, did you do a step change that changed the experience, or have you fundamentally like reimagined a financial services or fintech company? What was the intention?
Yeah, we like to describe it like an iceberg. So what you see above the water is what the innovation that we bring to our merchants, from the built-in software, the smart terminal and the hardware and the Android devices that we bring. That's very different than the old school kind of payment devices, right? But everything we have to build underneath the water to make the experience seamless is part of that innovation. So this is the automatic fraud checks and the automatic underwriting and all the pieces that don't sound very kind of sexy but are really hard to do, so that we came to market and we delivered an experience where it was truly turnkey. Like 20 questions, you're instantly up and running. You can, and it's omni-channel. So it doesn't matter if you're a dentist accepting payments in person or accept payments online for card on file. Everything is seamless under one account. That sounds easy. That sounds obvious. It was a whole lot of work to get there from a financial standpoint.
The other thing that has struck us, and like full disclosure, Digital Journal is a Helcim customer. We're in the process of moving most of what we do over to Helcim, and transparency was something that stood out to us. So not an endorsement, but a reflection of something that is not, you hear a lot of banks or financial services firms say transparency matters, but you actually live it. And can you talk to us a little bit about what that means for card fees and things, the processing fees that most others hide?
Yeah, and we appreciate your business, and we love that Canadian support. I think when it comes to, we made our mission statement to be the world's most loved payments company. That's an oxymoron in the payment space. Everybody needs payments, but nobody loves their payments company. It's pretty, I think up there with telco, it's pretty notorious for, hidden fees and contracts, and you think you're getting a low rate, and then you're getting nickel and dimed. And we took a totally different approach. So what if we were the good guys in a not so great industry? And the number one reason why people switch to us is pricing transparency. It's not even like we have good rates. We're certainly more competitive than the stripes and the squares, but more importantly, we have transparent rates. And people have been dragged through the mud so much that just that alone, it takes a lot of technology to make that happen, and a lot of will to make that, to stick to that brand. But I think just that alone has been transformational for us to grow to the size that we have. When
you back up 30,000-foot view on financial services in general, what's your take on where innovation is in the space, in the banking space, financial services? If you had to give it a grade and what sort of needs to be improved, what are your thoughts?
I think that it's about being able to bring it together. That's really the holy grail in fintech. So I think that individually, if you're a business and you're thinking about like card processing or currency exchange or your expense management or lending, all those services are available in the market, and there's kind of best in breed in each one. But it's really, really hard for somebody that can bring them all together really well. That's the holy grail, both for the customer and obviously the service provider, right?
Because why is it hard though?
You're just dealing with like very different businesses, different underwriting, different mindset, different flow. So you see companies, whether it's like a Helcim that's really on the payment processing, or say in Toronto like a Bank on Loop or a Float that's really on the expense management. Like, you can build pretty big businesses just separately, but whoever, and I think everybody in their mind is thinking about it, like whoever can really bring it all together will ultimately create the best experience for the business, because they'll have a complete view of the business. They can, your accounts receivable can fund your accounts payable, and the lending is just automatic. And, I think that's where everybody's heading. We'll see who gets there first and who can do it the best for small businesses.
And what kind of chance do you have to continue to grow and scale given the regulatory environment, the banking environment here? Where do you see obstacles or opportunity?
Yes. I think if you look at I think fintechs get really good at navigating it because it's not easy. Nobody hands it to you. Even be able to, banks in the end are still kind of gatekeepers to a lot of the systems, and that makes it really challenging. But fintechs find ways to make it work. I think if getting into the conversation of say like Payments Canada, you still have these massive gatekeepers to the systems, right? So
for those who don't know, Payments Canada
is the kind of technical arm of our money transfer systems. So EFTs, PADs. Even in part, Interact is all kind of connected through Payments Canada, but getting into Payments Canada as an actual, a seat at a table is extremely difficult. There's essentially one fintech that's been able to get a seat so far, and it's Wealthsimple, and that's amazing to see. But if you think about the size of fintechs that are in this country and the fact that it's so hard to get into it. I mean, that's part of the open banking conversation, just all that resistance in the system for us to have a seat at the table.
The obvious resistance is there's a lot of big companies making a lot of money. Are there technical reasons or other things that, like, from the outside, some might say, why isn't this happening? Is it politics? Is it money? Both? Yes?
I think there's a bit of yes, exactly. So I think it's a bit under the guise of, I think that's always the easy answer to like open banking. It's like, oh, we want to, privacy and regulations and protecting people's data. And it's like, nobody is saying that they want to do anything otherwise. But I think that's just the excuse, as opposed to, I think the real reason is really incumbents protecting their turf, and knowing that once the fintechs, because we can innovate so much faster and we can service a customer so much more directly, once they really open up those gates, they're going to have some real competitions on their hands, and they're trying to hold on to it for as long as they can.
What about the Build Canada approach, or the being Canadian mentality? I've heard you speak in other interviews about U.S. banks can deal with Payments Canada, and correct me if I'm wrong, in some cases easier than Canadian fintechs? Or what's the... Yeah. How do we build something in Canada if American companies can get in faster, easier?
I think that's, it's part of our protectionism kind of the mindsets happen in banking in Canada, which we like to tout that Canada's banking sector is stronger for it, but I would argue it's much less competitive for it, right? I think you can have competition and you can have resilience. I think that seeing those as opposites is a false dichotomy. I think that what we really need is we need Canadian consumers, we need Canadian businesses to have a loud voice and join the voice of fintechs and going like they can be serviced better. They can have access to lower fees, more options if we allow for more people in the system. And ultimately, it's going to come from within. What's happening right now with the Canadian kind of wake up is amazing because people are really realizing that we can't just be asleep on the sideline. We need to take this seriously for sovereignty, for the long-term prosperity of our country. We need to it should be easier for a Canadian fintech to get into Payments Canada than it is for a U.S. bank.
And if we go down the path of full open banking, in your view, like what would a full implementation look like in your view of what would be the right way to go about it? What do we need to see in open banking?
There's I think two core things. From the payment system side, I think is direct access. So right now, if a company like us is offering Interact, we have to go through a third-party bank. We can't access Interact directly. There's no reason for it. We have the capital, we have the pockets to be able to support the ledgers and be able to support those transfers. But right now, the system is set up that you have, so that just adds fees, slowness, and just makes it really, really hard to do so. I think direct access to the rails is super key to unlocking innovation and competition. The other part of it on the open banking side is the portability of your data. So say you're a bank customer and you want to move your business or you want to move your personal accounts, you should be able to do so and carry all of that data and then also make that data at your choice accessible to accounting platforms, to tax reporting platforms, everything that so that you can really have control over your data. That's super important for other companies to be able to underwrite you, give you loans at better rates, and so on. So I think there's a two-part to it of how we get there.
Has Helcim held back on any innovation because of the state of the banking industry right now?
I think I don't know if it's necessarily hold back. I think it just brings certain types of innovation very challenging. I'll give you a specific example. Because Interact is generally a more closed organization. They're starting to open up very, very slowly, and we hope to be one of the first ones with a seat at the table. But Interact is a unique system. It's a really good Canadian system. Merchants like it, but because it's a let's say more closed organization to work with, it limits our ability of what kind of hardware we can bring to market, what kind of innovation we can bring to our payment system. So you just feel held back of what you can do compared to other countries.
So the road ahead for Helcim, you're in a space where you can't entirely control your own future, but you're doing it anyways. What does the growth path look like for you? You're at 160 people now, continue to grow. What's next?
Yeah, I mean, fintechs are always in that tension of you wanting to be in control of your own destiny, but having a lot of barriers in your way. That said, it hasn't stopped us from some pretty big growth. We have some announcements coming up that you'll see that I think that show some big milestones that are coming. So I'm teasing that a little bit. But no, we continue to expand really rapidly in Canada. We're expanding rapidly in the U.S. I think in the coming years we'd like to look at Europe and expand beyond that, but always seeing it as that Canadian advantage of having amazing people right here. All of our headquarters are in Canada, and just growing a fantastic Canadian business.
Any final thoughts on a call to action on what you want to see federal regulators or folks in the innovation space, investors, the public? What's the marching orders to get innovation unlocked in your space?
I think it's going beyond the talking points of past 10 years of open banking and access to Payments Canada and actually making it happen. I don't think it has to be more complicated than, we have a new administration federally. I think that they are motivated to do what's right. And I don't think it's more complicated than picking up the phone and saying, make it happen. And then it happens.
Nic, thanks for joining us and thanks for sharing your journey and your insights.
Thanks for having me.
For more info on the fintech space, for more info on Helcim, you can visit digitaljournal.com.